Do you have any advice for a woman who, in a way, sabotages herself? Because we know about the structural inequalities, we know about the systemic problems, but it's usually or very often so much ingrained that we stop ourselves. We're censoring ourselves, right?
In what is called in English, How Women Rise, we look at 12 very common barriers. And I often have women say, oh, I have 9 of these habits. I don't know. These are internal barriers, as you say. I have 9 of these habits. I don't know where to start. Just start with one thing. Start with whatever is easiest. So say that you are having difficulty claiming your achievements. You are worried that if you talk about what you've achieved or contributed, you're going to be seen as arrogant or aggressive or very self-centered or not a supporter of the team. Say that you recognize that that's an issue and you really need to be able to strategically and clearly talk about what you've contributed. There are a number of things. You can use language of contribution, what I call it. This is something interesting in terms of translation. The language of contribution rather than achievement. So you say, I was able to contribute this to the effort we did. That then allows you also to speak about what your team has done. My team achieved this. We met these goals. Here were some of the outcomes. My contribution was. So that kind of language can be really helpful in terms of doing this. You don't have to imitate people who have no problems talking about their achievements. You can find your own way to do it. But then the second thing, and this is so important, find someone to help you. Find someone, say, I'm going into this meeting. I, in the past, have really had a hard time speaking up in this meeting. I've had some ideas. They didn't get noticed. I just turned quiet when that happened. I think the idea that I'm going to present today is really important and could be very helpful. Would you please, watch me, let me know how I do. Or if I get some pushback and you agree with the idea, could you speak up in support of it? You can say this to women.
Ally, right?
Yeah. So allies aren't necessarily big strategic allies who are going to be with you through your career. Your allies can be, people that you engage. I call it informal enlistment, that you informally engage just to go into a meeting and help you specifically with one thing. We can't do this alone. It's very difficult to make the kind of sustained behavioral changes that moving beyond our internal barriers requires.
I think that a lot of women, when they're climbing up their career ladder, they're carrying a backpack on their shoulders, right? The backpack of being too ambitious, as you write, of being perceived as maybe too sensitive or overreacting, or all those thoughts and sentences that were probably said to us at one point and keep us down. Do you have any advice how to unpack that backpack and just, start breathing and walking without this extra weight on our shoulders?
Well, yes, I do. One of the fundamental problems that I see, or habits, I should probably say, and I alluded to this earlier, is this desire to, or this need to manage what other people think. And that's why we get concerned. We might be seen as too ambitious, whatever it is. There is that management. This takes a lot of energy away from women, which is why the backpack feels heavy. Most men that I've seen who operate in organizations don't have that. If somebody, thinks they're a jerk, they just think, oh, he's a jerk. They don't go like, oh no, so-and-so doesn't like me. And there are lots of important lessons we can learn here. I learned one earlier in my career. I was working in corporate corporate communications. This is quite some years ago. And I had said something in a meeting. I made a suggestion. No one picked up on it. So it's the situation that you referred to earlier. No one picked up on it. I thought it was a good idea. But I was the only woman in that meeting, and I was the most junior person. So as I was walking out, my boss's boss came up behind me, and he said in a very scathing tone, "Well, you certainly don't have any trouble talking about your ideas," just like I had been so out of line. And I have no idea what got into me, but I just said, in the moment, I said, "No, I don't." I didn't say, "Oh, I'm so sorry. Maybe I spoke out of turn," or, I didn't get down on myself, although I did plenty of that later. But I wasn't defensive. I didn't say I have a perfect right to. I just said, "No, I don't." And I thought I would probably end up getting fired, because if my boss's boss thought I was terrible, then, that was not a good sign. So I didn't really change anything because I thought I'd probably be gone soon. And then about a month later, I heard him saying to someone in an office, I overheard it. He said, "You know what I like about Sally is she's not afraid to say what she thinks." And I realized that he'd had a chance to get used to it, because I did not step in and try to manage his perceptions, either by apologizing or trying to defend myself. And so that's one of the things. If a person has a bad opinion of us as we come out of a meeting, I'm not talking about doing things that are egregious. I'm talking about the kinds of things women can get criticized for,
being bossy.
Yeah, being bossy, being too passive, whatever. It's kind of a no-win. If someone thinks that, then that's their opinion. Let's move on. Again, we can't control what other people think. We can only control our own actions. But if we let that go, if we don't get too invested in it, or too fearful about it, or too concerned, or feel like we have to appease them in some way or change their mind, then very often they'll get used to us, and that won't be a problem anymore. We know this as people. We know that we might meet someone, think, "Oh, I'm not so sure about her." And then we find out as we get to know her that we really, really like her. This is very common. So I feel more and more that women let their energy be consumed by being concerned with what everyone thinks of them. And the time for that is really past.
Right. It's a great story. There is another story in this book which was very, very powerful to me. And I've been using it every time I spill something, or every time I forget something. I don't know why it's so powerful. If you could tell to our viewers the story about you and Marshall getting ready for your speech engagement. I think it's a very, very powerful story who could help a lot of people. So if you could recapitulate that for us, please.
When we were both speaking at the same event. Yep. Yes, it was that was, I would say, for me, the beginning of this book. My co-author, Marshall, who was at that time a really big deal, and I was, just someone working in women's leadership, not particularly high profile. Both of us had been asked to present at this large event for a technology company. And we decided to do it together. We've been colleagues and friends for a long time. We knew each other through a mutual acquaintance. And so it was in Rhode Island, and I arrived the day before, and I had some friends who were there, but I decided not to go out with them because I wanted to stay in my room and rehearse and go over and over my talk. It was a couple hours long, the program we were doing. And, I wanted to look I didn't want to look, in my mind, too much worse than Marshall because I knew he's a very good speaker and very popular. So I did that. And then the morning of the event, I was supposed to meet him in the lobby of the hotel. He had come in very late, and the client would pick us up and we would drive to the event. So I went down and he's wearing these cut off jeans. I thought, really? And he said, oh, I forgot my pants. So and he said, oh, I forgot my pants. Can we drive around and maybe go to J. Crew and I can pick up some khakis and put them. I've been traveling. I left them in the other hotel room. So we did that. And of course, made it late. We were driving all over trying to find some pants at 8:30 in the morning. And I kept thinking, I have nightmares about being on stage and not having pants. And here it's like, oh, I forgot my pants. We got to the venue. He had a couple other ridiculous things, such as the where you went into the ladies' room. The door was right in front of the audience, and he had to use it because that was the only place there was. So they put a sign in front. And then he came tumbling out and fell on his head. I was like, oh, I hurt my head. So all I could think of was how upset I would be, if I had fallen on my head coming out of the bathroom to the whole audience. So, and he just seemed unfazed by it. So we continued. We ran our program, and he was having a blast. He was like, oh, I don't think I'm going to talk about that. Let's talk about this instead. That kind of thing. Very spontaneous, very unplanned. I had my speech that I've been rehearsing for hours and hours and writing over and over. So I kind of stuck to the script. And then we got toward the end of the day, and his phone gave him a special signal that it was time. He had a signal from somebody that was urgent. So he looked at it and he said, oh, I got my flight time wrong. I've got to leave for the airport now, but you're in Sally's hands. And then he left. Guess what? He got a standing ovation. To me, he kind of screwed everything up, but they loved him because he was very spontaneous. Mm. And I was quite rigid and being the perfectionist and the good girl and all this sort of business. And so I soldiered on. And then when it was over, I got applause, nothing like a standing ovation. So as I was going home, I was thinking, what did I do? What happened there? These were women and it wasn't like it was men. Why did they love what he did and, were respectful of what I was doing? And I knew the answer. I'd over-rehearsed. I'd over-prepared. That made me too rigid. And I would have been better if I'd gone out with my friends the night before rather than stay in the hotel room. And when you're not perfect, you give other people permission to not be perfect. And I think that was one of the things that was going on with them. So it was a very good lesson to me in, again, I was expending all this energy trying to manage what people would think of me. And he was just trying to have a good time and talk a little bit about his work.
Right. One of the most poignant moments in this story for me personally, which probably says that I have this particular problem, was how mortified I would have felt by inconveniencing your clients to go get the pants, to finishing early and asking someone to take over, and all that. Do you have any trick or any advice how to stop this habit of not trying to inconvenience anyone?
Yes, and that goes to this business of managing perceptions. And guess what? We all inconvenience people, and people inconvenience us. And what I thought with him was he didn't, he just said, oh, I forgot my pants. He didn't say, look, I'm so sorry. I don't know how I could have done that. I searched the hotel room. Yeah, this is what I would have done at that point. I searched the hotel room. I've been calling them. I haven't heard anything. Endless apology going on and on about it. It was just like, I forgot my pants. I'm a human being. I'm not perfect. Fine. So it was really helpful to see that, because I think that when we over apologize like that, all we're doing is demonstrating our own commitment to an unrealistic expectation of perfection from ourselves. And he didn't have that. So it made it just kind of simple. It was a problem to be solved. Where can we find some pants? Instead of this rumination and self-accusation and endless apology tour. And this is a big one. This business women have of apologizing. I see it as a speaker. I have done events where the person who's in charge spends a whole time apologizing to me. I'm sorry, do you have any of this kind of coffee? No. Oh, I'm so sorry. I wish I'd known. I would have thought, is this coffee okay? I'm sorry, it's not the coffee. That kind of thing, just on and on. And it's not, I understand it, and I used to do it. It's a habit. That's what it is. It's not a sign of some weakness as a human being. It's just a habit. And like all these habits, it's born in very good qualities. It's not wanting to inconvenience others. It's being thoughtful. It's being considerate. It's not being a bad person. But you don't want to indulge your own feelings of regret. It keeps things focused on the negative as opposed to, so how are we going to solve this problem?
Yeah, exactly. You've just mentioned it's just a habit. What I also loved about this book, and I loved it all, but what I think is so powerful is that you distinguish in between habits and identity. Could you talk about that? How habits become something we think of ourselves?
That's exactly right. The habits we have form our impression of who we are to ourselves. And we hear people say this all the time. I'm the kind of person who, or I'm terrible at technology, or I can't write, or I make, little errors every time I write, or I'm clumsy, or I'm shy, whatever it is. We hear people characterize themselves based upon habits that are not intrinsic to their human identity or really an expression of who they are at their best. They've got a lot of other things that balance that out. And it's not helpful to let our habits be our identity, because we can change. And I think one of the things that really helps us with this is, talked before about identifying one thing that we think is getting in our way, even if we think 10 things are, starting with one, and then enlisting help. But it's also good to keep a kind of record of changes that we are able to make as we try to address a certain habit, because we will forget them. So we're thinking of ourselves as, I'm the kind of person who's shy and I don't speak up that much in meetings, or we can put a frame around it and say, I'm just very respectful of other people's opinions and I, don't speak up in meetings. So we think, however we describe it, we think we're someone who doesn't speak up in meetings. So we decide we're going to address that in a way. When we have something to say, we're going to contribute. We enlist people to either watch us or give us suggestions. What do? You seem good at it. Do you have any advice that would be good for me? We don't try to do it alone. And then we'll write down afterwards. I spoke, here's an idea I offered in a meeting. I spoke up. Here was the response. Here's how I responded to the response. So what we can do there is we can actually see ourselves changing, and we have a cue to remember it. And I've done this. And when you do it, you'll be paging back in the notebook you keep, and you'll think, oh, I did that. I've done that 5 times. Why do I still think of myself as someone who, whatever it is, we can change. That's some of the big news of the end of the 20th century, that this adult neuroplasticity exists, that adult humans can change their behavior, that you can teach an old dog new tricks. We evolve, we change, and it's really good to have a sense so we can almost document how we have changed.